It's Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. We're doing something a little different this week. You're about to hear 3 of our favorite interviews from Heat Rocks. That's one of our sister shows here at my company, Maximum Fun. I'm the executive producer of the show, helped create it. Heat Rocks is a music podcast about passion. It's hosted by Oliver Wang, who's a veteran hip-hop writer and DJ and very successful academic in the field of pop culture, and by Morgan Rhodes. She's a music supervisor who works very closely with Ava DuVernay. Every week, Heat Rocks brings you a conversation with a guest about the album that shaped their lives, an album that they think is truly great, a Heat Rock, in other words. Morgan and Oliver have talked with people like Cut Chemist, Ishmael Butler, Ann Powers, and many more. You can expect deep, compelling conversations about R&B and soul and jazz and hip-hop, Latin music, more. Oliver and Morgan use each record as a jumping-off point to talk about its history, its context, and why we care about it. You'll hear what I mean in just a minute. Let's start with Jay Smooth. Jay is a DJ and a writer. He founded the longest-running hip-hop radio show in New York City, the Underground Railroad on WBAI. He's also been a vlogger for many years and a commentator who, in addition to WBAI, can be heard right here on NPR. He's also a good friend of mine and I think one of the smartest thinkers in hip-hop and American popular culture. What did he pick for his Heat Rock? Raising Hell by Run DMC.
This speech is my recital. I think it's very vital to rock around. That's right. On time. It's tricky. Here we go. It's tricky to rock around. To rock around. That's right. On time. It's tricky. It's tricky. Tricky. It's tricky to rock around.
Jay Smooth, welcome to Heat Rocks.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited to talk. I mean, this album and Run DMC in general are such a big reason why I'm here doing any of this kind of work, and in a larger sense, any of us that have a hip-hop voice. They're such a big reason why we're here. So I'm glad to honor that in whatever way we can.
I want to know from each of you, do you remember the first time you heard this album?
Man, the first time, I remember vividly the first time I heard Run DMC, when I heard Sucker MC's
a friend of mine asked me to say some MC rhyme, so I said this rhyme I'm about to say. The rhyme was there, so then it went this way.
I was sitting on the top bunk of my bunk bed in my room, and I used to put the bed sheet over my head to just be alone with my little transistor radio and check out whatever songs they were playing on 92 KTU or BLS. And this track came on that was so unlike all of the hip hop that had come before. It was just this one militaristic drum beat, and the vocals were just so hard and gritty. I was sitting there like, what is happening right now? This is something serious. And I just felt like in that moment, the whole world of what hip hop could be was opening up for me. I was like, I feel like I'm joining a movement right now.
Morgan, how about you? What was your first encounter with Run DMC?
Well, it was 1580K Day, and legendary DJ Greg Mack.
Mac Attack.
For sure. And it was, It's Like That.
And that's the way it is. People in the world come to make it beat. You travel by car, train, bus, or feet. I said you.
I just was like, what is this? And I remember thinking, damn, I don't have any more tapes, right? But I just remember thinking that, like, I want to remember these lines. And for years after that, whenever the issue of cash would come up, I'd say, money is the key to end all your woes.
Jay, why did you want to talk about Run DMC and Raising Hell with us today?
It may not be possible for people to understand who weren't around for hip-hop's evolution in the 80s. It might not be possible to understand how unrespected and unrecognized hip-hop was by the entire mainstream of America before Run DMC. And Run DMC articulated from as soon as they came out this mission of, we're going to take this style that we created here in New York, in the hood, this generation of black and brown people, and we're going to make the entire world take notice and pay attention and respect it, and we're going to do it on our terms. We're going to take these 2 microphones and these turntables and come up on this stage, and you're going to respect that just as much as you respect any singer that comes up here with the band. And I don't think it's possible for people under a certain age to understand what a preposterous claim that was, that you would ever be able to do that.
Jay, and I know we're here talking about Raising Hell, but do you think Raising Hell is their best album?
I would have to say so. I mean, I love each of the first 3 albums, but that's the one where the sound really comes together. And in interviews, they'll talk about how on the first 2 albums, they were kind of running through the book of rhymes they already had and throwing it together. But with Raising Hell, they wanted to really sit down and compose things together and just make a cohesive album project.
This was sort of a coming of age for me around the time that I was getting into MTV. And one thing that made Run DMC and this album larger than life is that I saw so much of it on MTV. I saw the videos, I saw them on. So they, to me, were a band. Like, it was 2 brothers rapping, but Run DMC to me was like a huge band. And so I think it's hard for this generation to sort of appreciate the classicness of this album and this band, because MTV now is like reality shows and gook, and no shade, you know, but it isn't what it was, and we don't rely on it for our musical content in the way that we did then, and in a way that allowed acts like Run DMC to be larger than life.
I think partly what you're talking about is the impact of the single Walk This Way, which is
Exactly.
a cover essentially of an Aerosmith song, but in a way that you don't remember that Aerosmith actually recorded the song to begin
Right.
with. And Jay, I'm wondering, when you first heard and especially saw the video for Walk This Way, what did you think that the kind of statement they were trying to make?
I heard the song before I saw the video. I got the cassette tape of the album. I'm rocking to every track. And then I get up to this track, Walk This Way, and I am just flummoxed. I have no understanding of what the hell is supposed to be going on right now. I have never heard the song Walk This Way. I've never heard of Aerosmith. Right. And I have no idea what's supposed to be good. Like, what is all this weird gravelly singing? What part of hip hop is this? I hated that record when it came out. Then once I saw the video and I learned, okay, Aerosmith is this band and people use that track as a break beat. So now they're mixing the 2 styles together. Once I had, and the video does a great job of telling the story and giving you that context. Once I saw that, I understood it a little better. I still didn't love it, but I grew to appreciate it in a different way. And I got to say, listening back to the album now, I think that is the track that's aged best. And I can sort of enjoy it more than I enjoy most of the other tracks,
that's
oddly enough. But when it came out, I didn't get it at all.
I mean, we got to dig into that real quick. Why do you think that song has aged the best, as you just said?
It may just be music that's based on synthesized drums and sounds. It relies on whether those particular drum sounds come to sound dated compared to electric guitar and so on. That's a more timeless sound that can have more staying value. And probably engineers and the people mastering in the studio have more experience mastering this rock band, so they probably did a better job of recording it in a way. And also, I just may be more open-minded about rock music than I was when I was 13 years old. That could also be a part of it. That was a song that frustrated me at the time, because after years of me rooting for Run DMC to really earn that respect from the rest of the world and for people to recognize how much we love them, they finally got that acclaim from the wackest song they ever made in my eyes at the time. So I had a lot of mixed feelings about it. Now I can sort of look back and appreciate more.
I might not have liked the song outside of the video. The video really did it for me. What I didn't know, I think I was just too young to know, was I was so focused on the hip hop part. It wasn't until I got older that I was like, wait, what what is Aerosmith really talking about? So his lyrics were a little bit on the, I had to listen to it again to be like, what? I think one of the things that will always put them in this unique place in hip-hop history is the way that they flow together. That sort of call and response back and forth. It always felt like they were just completing each other. I just didn't hear that after that. And even when you had people rapping together or groups rapping together, it was just this particular brand of magic that I don't think I have heard since.
This speech is my recital. I think it's very vital to rock around. That's right, on time. It's tricky. It's tight. Here we go. It's tricky to rock around. To rock around. That's right, on time. It's tricky. It's tricky.
Morgan, you were mentioning K-Day earlier. What kind of songs off that album were in heavy rotation out here?
Well, the two that I heard all the time were Walk This Way and Peter Piper. And Peter Piper is my jam.
Now Peter Piper pick peppers, but run rock, rhyme, Humpty fell down. That's his art. Time, Jackie, nimble, what? Nimble, and he was quick, but jam. Mass mud, faster jacks on J's. It's my little Bo Peep, Cole lost her sheep, and Rip Van Winkle fell a hell asleep. And out of chilling summer in Wonderland, Jack serving Jill bucket in his hand. And damn,
but that's one of my favorite songs, and that's what I heard. My question for you, I'm from LA, and so, raised here, so that's what I heard on the radio from this album. What did you hear? What was every single from the album being played out there?
Most of the big singles were played a lot out here. Peter Piper was definitely my favorite as well. And I think that's the other one that's also aged really well, which might speak to my theory about synthesized drums being more likely to get stale, because Peter Piper is Jam Master Jay actually cutting that Bob James record back and forth at the core of it. I think that helps the sound. Peter Piper was definitely all around. It's Tricky was all around. I mean, Hit It, Run, Perfection. Pretty most of the tracks on the album you would hear around New York pretty often.
It's kind of hard to imagine an album of this magnitude having an underrated song on it, but if there was one, what do you think is the one that doesn't get enough love?
Going back and listening to it now, one that stuck out for me was Is It Live, which has a real go-go element mixed into it, which I don't think I recognized as such at the time.
Well, I'm dropping MCs with just one punch, 'cause it's the baddest on the boat, so call me Captain Crunch. Slaying MCs, make 'em walk the plank, and what's next, while the next, while I count my bank.
That was one I was nodding my head to pretty heavily when I went back and revisited.
All those songs you mentioned are fire, but also what's fire for me is My Adidas. It's not my favorite. Peter Piper's my favorite, but My Adidas is a jam. I was surprised you didn't pick that one.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, My Adidas is not my favorite musically as far as what I would go back to compared to Peter Piper, but I think My Adidas is the perfect encapsulation of the arc of Run DMC's career.
My Adidas, walk through concert doors and roam all over Coliseum floors. I stepped on stage at Live Aid, all the people gave and the poor got paid.
That song was taken by a lot of people as just some sort of materialism and a window into getting your first sponsorship deals from Adidas, which it did also open the way for. But to me, that song is such a beautiful, poetic exploration of the idea of these humble tools that we developed here in New York City, out on the corner, have taken us around the world, and we've gotten to represent our culture and our generation on stages around the world. We went on Live Aid, and the poor got paid, and we did it in these same Adidas sneakers that all of y'all are wearing out on the block where we came from. And we're always out there representing y'all, and we come back to y'all.
A sucker tried to steal 'em, so and I walked down the street and bopped to the beat with Lee on my leg and Adidas on my feet. And yo, now I'm just
That song tells the whole story of what Run DMC had journeyed through and achieved in a way that I love, and just it doesn't speak to me musically as deeply as some of the others, but in terms of the story that it tells, I think it's the perfect Run DMC song.
And Jay, I think you were mentioning there's a certain ambivalence one could have around Raising Hell, that on the one hand, because it was such an important and popular album, it shifted the paradigm, but at the same time, it also created the opening in which the commercialization of hip-hop, in ways in which it kind of gets away from the roots of where it started in the 70s, this album also made those things possible. And My Adidas seems to be a bit of an encapsulation of that kind of ambivalence that one could have, right?
Yeah, I mean, every big step in hip-hop's evolution and penetration of American culture has been a gift and a curse in some ways. I mean, for a lot of people who were around in the 70s, hip-hop as they knew it died when the first hip-hop vinyl came out.
Right.
Because the idea of a hip-hop record was anathema to them. Hip-hop was supposed to happen in the form of this community event at the party. And I think there's truth to that, and that's an understandable sentiment, but also that compromise of letting it be turned into a mass-produced commercial product is what allows It Takes a Nation of Millions to travel around the world and spark generations of activists. So much of what we love about what hip-hop became comes out of each step of compromise between the purity of art and community and the sort of propulsive power of commerce and that capitalist instinct.
As a West Coaster listening to this album, one of the things, and Run DMC in general, I got put on a lot of East Coast slang that we didn't use. And one of my first introductions was "You be illin'," and I was like, "Yo, this is." to borrow a term, this is ill. But yeah, that's just a little West Coast factoid. That was one of my jams on here, and I didn't expect to like it, but I did, just because of the culture that it introduced me to, East Coast hip hop culture.
That's a trip to hear Morgan talk about how she was introduced to East Coast culture that early. I sort of feel jealous because it wasn't for a few more years that we here in New York would have that same experience of getting to know West Coast culture the same way. I wish there hadn't been that imbalance. I remember when I was first hearing NWA, or maybe Eazy-E's solo album I heard first. They kept talking about Compton, and I was like, well, what is Compton in New Jersey? I don't really know. It took me a while to sort of piece together what I was getting exposed to, and then this whole new understanding opened up. First of all, of the idea that hip-hop could be this thing that finds its own voice around the country and then around the world. And it showed me there's this whole other culture on the West Coast I didn't know.
As important as Raising Hell was, within 2 years, they dropped Tougher Than Leather, and you just felt like the moment had passed. And they went from basically being the most important rap group on the planet to feeling like has-beens in like 24 months, which I think partly says something about the speed and the pace at which hip-hop was evolving. And Jay, I mean, you made a great point about how Rakim, just his rhyme schemes took some of the basic ideas of what Run DMC was doing and then leveled it up, like many, many levels up. But how is it that Run DMC managed to not so much, it's not that they ethered themselves per se, even though I think there were a lot of label problems and kind of industry shenanigans that held them back in the process. But that group went from, again, top of the world to feeling outdated in a really fast amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just this confluence of factors that all came together to add up to what for them was a worst case scenario. Like they had a gap of maybe a year and a half longer than they meant to between Raising Hell and the next album. And then that gap happened to be the most creatively explosive stretch of time that hip-hop had had up until then, with this whole new generation led by Rakim, G-Rap, Kane, KRS, and so on, just sort of rewriting the whole blueprint. I've said the word blueprint a lot, but this was the era when blueprints were still being laid down. And by the time Run DMC came back with Tougher Than Leather, I remember reading at the time that they knew they were in trouble and needed to figure out how to recalibrate for this new world. And they re-recorded tracks, like I think they re-recorded tracks like Run's House and Beats to the Rhyme. But it was just too late for them to catch up.
This totally makes me think of something that Peter Guralnick, who has written a lot about R&B and soul music of the 60s, he wrote about when Aretha Franklin's I Never Loved a Man came out, and this was, I guess, 1967 or so. And I'm going to try to get the quote right. I might be a little bit off, but it was basically that hearing the title track off that album for the first time, it was as if the millennium had arrived, you know, just albeit 40 years early. I've always wanted to be able to climb into that time machine and go back and experience what it is that Guralnick meant by that. What does it mean to hear something and feel like, okay, the future is here now? I think we all desire to have those things because we read about it and it sounds amazing, and it's impossible to know unless you actually live through it.
Yeah, and it's, that I was having this sort of double consciousness when I went back to listen to the album this week of feeling all this rush of emotion and nostalgia and pride for everything this music meant to me. But I was also trying to listen with the ear of someone who's hearing this for the first time now, having grown up on Jay-Z or Outkast, much less Future or Migos, and trying to grapple with this and understand what people connected with. And I felt like with that ear, this probably sounds a lot clunkier than it does to my 44-year-old nostalgic ear. And I think that's that's just the way of things with art. Some things are going to end up in that box.
If you had to describe Raising Hell in 3 words, I know that's tough for you writers and intellectual types, but I got to pose it because we do it all the time. If you had to describe Raising Hell in 3 words, what would those 3 words be?
I would say hard. I want to say brilliant, but I mean brilliant in terms of it being strategic, as well as it just being a brilliant work of art. Like it was brilliantly conceived in terms of their calculations of how to hit different notes and connect with different people with the places they took each song. And then I would say beautiful. I mean, it's just, it's beautiful for me to go back and revisit and feel the pride that I felt for these young artists going out and showing the world what my generation of black and brown people and my generation of New Yorkers was contributing to the world, and sort of making people feel and understand a bit of the pride that we have been feeling about this hip-hop culture for a while already.
Jay Smooth. If you want to hear more from him, his radio show Underground Railroad plays Friday nights at 10 on New York's WBAI. You can stream it there as well. You can also check out his video commentary series, which for my money is absolutely as good as it gets. It's called The Ill Doctrine. You can find more about Jay and his work at, and this is going to show you what an internet music commentary OG Jay is, hiphopmusic.com. Yeah. He registered that himself. It's not like he bought it from some dude that registered it a long time ago. He registered that when nobody else had hiphopmusic.com.